Upper Norwood Library Hub's Library Live Lunch. This is a place to share positive and useful local information, find out about our fabulous community in a bit more depth, and just try and keep us all connected during this time. So my guest today is Jennifer Farmer, who is a writer, theatre maker, not enough caffeine this morning yet, clearly, a writer, theatre maker and educator. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to have you here today.
My pleasure, Eleanor. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your background. You've got quite a varied career.
I do. I'm originally from the US, so don't let my accent fool you. From the South, Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I discovered writing at a very early age as something that I really enjoyed, but I was told I was good at. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, what is this all about? And then particularly sort of theatre, because I just had a wonderful theatre teacher in high school, so at 14, and just could bring just those two skills together of the communal experience of what theatre is and it being live and sort of all the things that I love about it and that I'm sorely missing as we're in lockdown. And wanting just to have that sort of collaboration with other people. And so I went to New York to study at New York University Tisch School of the Arts. So I was originally there for journalism, to sort of, satisfy my parents. With the idea that I was going to kind of sneak into theatre. And then I just said, I'm here, let's just do it. And it was brilliant. So I got a degree in dramatic writing, so writing for performance. And so I lived in New York for 6 years, and then I moved to London in summer 1998. So in August, it will be however many years that is. I think it's 22. I think 22 years. Yeah, so 22 years I've been here.
Wow, long enough to get acclimatized.
Yes. There's still a few things. I'm still, a bit chilly sometimes. Still love iced tea. But it's still really exciting to be here.
Do you think you mentioned your drama teacher, who's very inspiring? Has that had an impact on you ending up as an educator?
I think it's impacted my approach, because everything was possible for us. And so we were doing, really obscure European plays. I mean, we're kids, in the South in Tennessee, doing these really obscure European plays, but also, Zora Neale Hurston short stories that were adapted and everything in between. And so it just felt like there was no barrier as to what stories we could explore, as long as the idea was with integrity. And I think that's just been something that's been my approach as an artist, but also then I think how I engage with other writers, because I think it's just so important to just be empowered by storytelling, and don't feel like there are any limits as to what stories you can tell, as long as you're doing it with integrity and respect. So
wow. Has that also led you, because you do a lot of work with marginalized communities, underrepresented voices, it sounds like that's a fairly clear path through to there as well?
Yes. I started out, I think the first piece that I could sort of identify was my play Compact Failure, which was produced in 2004. And that was commissioned and produced by the company Clean Break, who's create theatre for women who've had experience in the criminal justice system. So I did a residency in a prison and sort of worked with the writers there to do either plays, essays, poetry, short stories. So not dissimilar to the work that we'd be doing with the Crew program, which we'll talk about later. But just, that was the first piece that I think I wrote with and for a community that was underrepresented. And so from there, I've worked with the V&A Museum, working with people, users of the mental health care system, refugees with Theatre Royal Stratford East. I've worked with the Belgrade Theatre, particularly with young people who've had, where mainstream education might not be the best fit for them. And, older generations at Bolton Octagon. So quite a broad range, but I think that's what sort of keeps me on my toes and excited in that way, because every group is going to have their own ideas and their own sort of unique outlook. And so it's just really nice for me to sort of just be able to engage with just very different participants.
Are there particular threads that kind of run through those groups? Are so varied, but are there threads that you notice that kind of run across all of them?
I think one thing is people don't want to only be identified by a certain label, and I think particularly a label that's been put on them externally. And so, there's a lot of the conversation about, even using the words marginalized or vulnerable. I've started to shift even in my dialogue of sort of saying underrepresented, because it's who's being labeled vulnerable by whom. And so that's I thought a big topic for us to discuss. So I think it's sort of looking at just the scope of humanity and sort of that not being the only currency. Yeah. I think a lot of times groups know that the reason why they might have access to me is because of this external labeling, but I just really want them to know that that's not all we can talk about. Mm-hmm. If we want to create a piece about what is it to, build a rocket ship to the moon, that's just as valid as, talking about the difficulties of navigating the mental health care system. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably one thing about people just taking ownership of their identities.
And telling the story that they want to tell.
Exactly.
Rather than the one that's been put on them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Just before we carry on and talk about your new projects, I just want to say hello to everybody who's watching. It's great to have you guys. I can see that we've got Nick joined us on the Facebook page. So hi, Nick. Hello to everybody else whose names I can't actually see at the moment. If you've got any questions for Jennifer as we go along, please do put them in the comments of this, whichever social media feed you're on, and we'll try and answer them as we go. So Jennifer, tell us a bit about your new project with Stanley Halls and Disentangle projects.
So this is Crew, which is a writing program for emerging writers. And you can be writing in any medium. So it could be poetry, it could be songwriting, it could be writing for the screen, live performance, radio, prose, so everything that's there. And it's really about supporting and amplifying those underrepresented narratives and voices in whatever way that people want to be able to share them. And so it's sort of giving, certain things of tools, such as we'll look at the building blocks of, what are the specifics to writing for a particular medium, looking at structure and, how to create dynamic characters. But we also look at what is unique to your voice. I think that's something that's really important, is for people to recognize that only you can tell this story this way. So what is it that is unique to your voice? As well as, getting into those heavier topics of the creative and political challenges of centering underrepresented narratives, particularly that could be in opposition to mainstream tellings.
Mm-hmm. So removing barriers.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Providing the building blocks so that people can do that for themselves as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's the idea, I think we're going to hopefully start on the 12th of August. So not far away at all. And so it's going to be online and sort of over 20 weeks. We're still going to work it out, because I like to be very organic with the needs of all my groups and participants. So we might have weekly meetings. We might do it every other week, because I think it's also important to give people time to write, because however much we, want to be ambitious, life does get in the way, even in lockdown. So if, caring, sort of caregiving, responsibilities come up, doctor's appointments, anything like that, just for us to be ambitious, but also what's the word I'm looking for? Realistic in our approaches.
Yeah.
So going through that, having some time to also receive sort of mentorship as well. And we would then have a celebration of the work in November with an online festival performing the pieces. So.
Fab. There's so many things in there I want to ask about. I'll try and remember them in order. So tell us about actually, so online, because this has become such a big thing in the last few months, and there are just different challenges associated with it, aren't there? So how do you navigate kind of working out what people need individually and create this whole new course in a effectively new medium?
Well, I mean, I'm still working it out myself. This will be the first project that is starting from scratch online for me. So I'm having to, adapt some of my usual techniques, but also trying to sort of, create new ones. Whereas I would be much easier to gauge people's sort of engagement, their interaction, their energy when we're in a room together. That might be slightly more challenging as a facilitator because, we are in people's private spaces where we're online. You want to be respectful that if people want to turn their cameras off, that's a possibility so we just have to sort of adapt to that. So I think it's just really sort of about communication and sort of always asking what works for you, what could be helpful. I think the brilliance of it being online is the accessibility that it's just allowing us now of people who, of previous courses that I've done that's been moved online, people who were, in Scotland who may not have had an opportunity to get involved in a course now have been able to. And so I think it's just that sort of thing there that we just have to hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of opened a new door without necessarily completely closing the old one, I hope.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, as I was saying, I make things. I love being in rooms with people. I love collaboration, and I'm sorely missing it. Yeah. But we will be in rooms together again at some point as a society. But knowing that that's not lost, and knowing that we can still harness that communal and collective energy is really key, I think, for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a minute, I'd love you to tell us about sort of a bit more about the final end point of this and kind of how you're going to get there. But I'm just going to say hello to some more people who've joined us in the meantime. So hello to Samantha, Hester, Beatrice, Terence, Lucinda, and Justin. Great to have you guys. And Nushki. Brilliant. And anybody else whose names we can't see across the different platforms, if you've got any questions for us, please do put them in the comments. And actually, Nick says morning to both of us as well.
Morning, Nick. Thank you.
So tell us a bit about the online kind of festival that's the end point, and how you're getting there, and how's it going to work?
I think that it's so crucial to be able to celebrate the fruits of our writing labor, and so with Disentangle and Stanley Halls, it was just very clear that we wanted to have that celebration. And not knowing where we'll be in 3 months' time, at this point we are thinking about it being online. And we've seen lots of work that's been presented online, presented digitally. And while we would like to be in rooms with each other, we still know that we can do that work with integrity and excitement and enthusiasm. So we will have professional actors working with us for the writers who may not want to perform their own work. So we're bringing those skills too, because I think it's very important to acknowledge the value of that work. And who you can be then sort of bringing on as a collaborator in that sense. And so it's we're still sort of trying to figure it out, really, to be honest with you, responding to what work is going to be created by the writers. So if we need to do something that might need to be pre-recorded, that's possible. a sense that if something needs to have a bit more sort of direction to make it work specifically for a digital performance, then we can work with that either, through in the beginning and throughout the process, or how do we do it at the end? Because sometimes people might not want to be writing specifically for a Zoom performance. But then we will also just recognize what compromise we might have to make, or or the challenges and solutions we might have to find to make that happen. So that's the idea.
Yeah, adaptability and flexibility is a really big thing for you, isn't it?
Yes, I mean the last month we've proven we have to be resourceful and just sort of figure it out, and keeping us on our toes and keeping us nimble. But I think there's so much that we are learning about how we can do that, and I think a lot of it is really down to communication and preparation, really. So I think that just so that people feel just that bit more secure in how something will be shared.
And actually, just going back to what you were saying about some people might prefer to have actors perform their piece rather than performing it themselves. I guess it's very different. It's just very different, isn't it? Performing it yourself or seeing somebody else do it and maybe having a bit more directorial input from the outside, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I think that every writer, well, actually, to back up, within the project, in the program, there will be actually space to work with actors in terms of workshopping your piece, in order to be able to give you that distance. Because I think as a writer, you just do need to just sort of have the other voices in the room in that way to give you some objectivity. And not everyone's opinion or feedback might work for you, but I think it's just really exciting and part of the collaborative nature of some mediums of writing to be able to have actors who can then sort of let you know what they might need from you as their writer, as a collaborator in that way.
Yeah, really useful actually, isn't it, to have that feedback from the people who are trying to perform it.
Yes,
interesting.
definitely.
Yeah, interesting. So what are the aims of this in terms of what the writers will get out of it?
Well, hopefully there will be the foundations of writing for different mediums. And so we've left it open for people to respond in a way that, how do you want to tell stories? And I know we're going to talk about that a bit later. But it's also learning to perhaps come outside of your comfort zone. And so if you come in as a poet and then go, oh, hang on a minute, I might try to see how I can write for the screen. That's absolutely what we want for people to do, is to feel a sense of confidence that they can explore these different ways of working and telling stories, in a safer environment that's going to be, constructive and supportive. It's definitely about supporting and amplifying underrepresented voices. And that means, that means so many things. And I think from particularly Croydon, such a rich area of London, it's really about people who don't see their stories out there in the mainstream. How can we center in those stories? How do we come in from the margins, or highlight the fact that these stories have been there all along?
Yeah.
For people to also have a sense of ownership of Stanley Halls in particular, as their space, and a space that is there to work with and for them as a community, and to build a relationship with the venue and with the company Disentangle, because we don't want it to be just a one-off program where November, after we finish the Zoom meeting, it's sort of saying goodbye, but that people feel as though that they can pop in to say, well, I've got this idea, or I've got this project, and just to know that they have a writing home. So I think that that's just really crucial as well.
Yeah. I was going to ask you next who you were hoping to get involved, but I think you've kind of covered that.
Yes, I mean, it is really open to, people who want to tell stories, and particularly the stories that we're just not seeing,
Mm,
and obviously then challenging why we aren't seeing them as
mm,
well. So I think that's just definitely
yeah.
sort of who we're hoping will apply. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Let's actually talk about the application very briefly then. So the website is actually in the social media comments under the video for anybody who's interested in applying. There's a I was very intrigued by this. There's a really open question that's in the application. So you have to, I think it's 200-word answer to this question, which is, what stories would you like to tell and how would you tell them? So that's really broad. Tell me what was behind that.
Yes, I think with Disentangle, we worked on this quite a bit because I was sort of coming at it from my experience of sort of questions I'm applying for something, and just the ones that really frustrate me because it's sort of trying to be quite sort of rigid in what they're asking. And I just or sort of sending a sample of writing, but it's like because one piece of work tells you about that piece of work and it doesn't sort of tell you about the writer themselves. Not so much. So we sort of thought, what is it that could inspire people? And so if someone wants to send their application of 200 words in the form of a poem or a song or a voicemail, we have that.
Ah.
It's really very open in that sense. Partly, accessibility, but also to get a sense of people's passions, people's sort of views and sort of what they might need in that way. Because I think, there's sort of lots of questions, that you just sort of go, I don't, how will you develop in 20 years? I don't know. I don't know. So just really sort of, just sort of hopefully being a bit more gentle and generous in allowing people to give their individual voice in that way. That just sort of shows you that this would be the project for them.
I love the creative number of options for how you could present it, though. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's I mean, I think there's just so many ways of us communicating, and even it's a program for writers, but it's also really sort of challenging. Well, what is writing? We've been telling stories before we could pick up pencil and paper or clay, tablets or laptops. So it's sort of also just embracing that it's not just about putting words in a particular order in a written form. And so, I think that's just something we really wanted to sort of honor that as well, how people want to tell stories, and just be really sort of excited by it. Yeah. And challenged as well. Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating looking through all the submissions, I think.
It will be. It will be. I know we've gotten a few already. We've got a voicemail that Disentangle sent me, so I'm sort of ready to listen to that. Because I think I'm just going to be really excited, and I just know that we're just going to be blown away by just how just the different ways that people are going to respond, and just sort of what inspires them, and how they want to then sort of share that with others.
And is there a strict kind of numbers limit? Are you going to have to whittle it down?
I think it's 15. I think. Just so that because I think it's also a trickier thing with it being online is how much you can sort of engage a certain number of people in the same way. I think time flies by much more quickly online, because it just has different pulls of our attention and energy in that way. And I find it a little bit more tiring, to be honest with you, because I don't think you're also feeding off of the physical energy of people in a room, which I think can sustain you. So I think that it's 15, but please do email Disentangle just to be sure, or they'll let you know. They'll let us know. I think it's about 15.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because you kind of want to be able to see everybody on the screen and be able to give people individual time and things as needed. And not so many people, they can't interact with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because it is very much about building a writing community as well. Hopefully people, the writers will go on to create their own peer-led writing networks, because I think that that's just the most brilliant thing. And for me as a facilitator, when writing groups that of people who've come together, strangers, then continue to work together, to me that's just like the best accolade that they could give me, to be honest with you, because it just feels like we've created some certain a synergy together that they just feel so confident in what they can offer, but also what others offer, that they want to sustain their bond. So
and actually I imagine writing can be really quite a lonely occupation, and so being able to build community is really, really important, isn't it?
absolutely. I think at this time it's just even more so. Writing can be solitary, but because I write mostly for theatre or live performance, at some point I'm going to get into a room with a director or performers or other collaborators. But even people who may do sort of say poetry or prose, there still will usually be a writing network that you'll have, and that's just been so disrupted by what's happened, that we really, I think we are leaning more on these kind of opportunities to be able to provide those networks. And I think they just get bigger even, which I think is just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, it's not the online element takes away any need for you to be in the actual place where it's happening, and that is a potential huge positive, I think, of being able to do that.
Absolutely. I do know with this project that we don't want to we want to make sure that sort of the lack of online facilities won't prevent people from participating. And so I know there are conversations that Disentangle and Stanley Halls are having about either, I think working with the Upper Norwood Library to be able to see how we might be able to facilitate that if people don't have online access, because we've recognized that can also be a challenge that a lot of times we've taken for granted. So we definitely don't want people to feel as though they can't participate if they don't currently have digital access.
Yeah, brilliant. We're nearly out of time, actually. Is there, just before we finish, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of have the conversation about, they're a bit worried about with what's going on right now, currently and globally. Is my story, is it good enough? And should I be talking about something that's a bit more important? And I think, we're going to need all the stories when we come out of this, which we will come out of this. In a different way, but we will need all those stories. And so I don't want people to feel as though that their stories and ideas aren't valid and aren't serious enough, because we're going to need the joy and the humor and the kindness and compassion just as much as we need stories of resilience and difficulty. So we're going to need it all.
And also the everyday.
The everyday, yes, absolutely. Yeah. We yes, and I think just to really embrace that, just because it's so much about taps into our humanity, and so we're definitely going to need that for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. You're leading in so beautifully to the one thing that I need to advertise today. So I'm just going to sideline into that, which is our All Alone Together project at the Upper Norwood Library Hub, which is also funded by the Arts Council. And in fact, Norman from Disentangle is very much involved in this as well. So we are creating an oral history of the pandemic in our community, and we would love as many of you guys watching to get involved. We are also trying to reach the biggest cross-section of the community we can, underrepresented voices. So there's two ways to do this really. One is to fill in our very short survey on the website. It's literally 4 questions. There is a box to tick on the survey to say you're willing to be interviewed, and if that is the case, I would love to have a chat with you in a bit more depth and find out about your experiences. And very similar to what Jennifer has just been saying about the Croydon Emerging Writers Project, we're really interested in all the stories. They don't have to be particularly unusual or dramatic. I'm really interested in the everyday and just how the everyday has changed. So we would love to hear from you. If you would like to be interviewed but don't want to fill in the survey, give us a shout at info@unlt.org. And yeah, we just really want as many people as possible to get involved, both so that we can look at what services we provide going forward, see how we can help, and also to create an oral history of this time so that you can hear our community in their own words, in their own voices, describing their experiences, which I think is just going to be amazing. So please do get involved. That's it from me for today. I'll be back tomorrow with Christine Warner, who is from Bereavement's Help Point. We're going to be talking a bit about bereavement during the pandemic, how the pandemic has affected that. I had a chat with her last week. It's not going to be as heavy as it sounds, but just really, really interesting. So please do tune in for that tomorrow. Jennifer, it's been wonderful to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Eleanor. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.